Humility, everybody loves it in other people. It's a social lubricant and a stress buster, but missing the mark is self-defeating. Here's how to get it right. Welcome to 21st Century Adulting. Today, we are going to talk about humility. Kill your inner narcissist, not your self-esteem. Humility is widely prized and often misunderstood and misimplemented. Wisdom traditions all speak a lot about it in their own way. If you look at Christianity, they say it is the mother of all virtues, being what they call the opposite of pride, which is the root of all evil. Humility in Christianity is submission of the self to God. So the benefits, therefore, the benefits within Christianity is having humility enables us to receive the grace of God, to participate in the divine life, and inherit the kingdom of God, which I want you to understand also through this article that when we say the kingdom of God, there's a split within Christianity. A lot of people don't really understand that. They believe heaven is the kingdom of God and that it is someplace other than where we are at now. There are quite a few people who believe and practice saying, this is the kingdom of God. What we are living right now, this is it. This is our opportunity. And I think that's an important frame when we start to get through the rest of this piece on humility and see what other wisdom traditions and psychology say about it. It helps it fit better. If we look at Buddhism is another one we're going to talk about today. Buddhism, again, it's not so much humility, right? But they say it's the path to less suffering. In Buddhism, suffering is inevitable. You are going to suffer. Things will be suboptimal no matter what. But through being a good Buddhist and following the rules and applying the numbered things that they have, you can obtain less suffering. And specifically in this concept, we're talking about what they call egolessness, this concept of no self. There is no self. What you think of as you is just a fleeting of parts. What you think of is you is just a collection of fleeting parts on loan from the universe with some experiences. That is not a solid thing. And this grasping onto this sense of self and the constant comparing ourselves to other people or what we wish we were or we wish was going on in the world is what causes suffering. So with them, this concept of no self, which I really equate to humility, practicing it dismantles this illusion of self or ego with the goal of liberation from suffering as much as you can. It's a little bit different in Confucianism. Again, Confucianism, a lot of it, it's a wisdom tradition. It's not a religion, but a lot of it has to do with a harmonious society. So within Confucianism, what they say it is really the foundation of self-improvement, and psychology agrees on that. And obviously, if you look at Buddhism or Christianity, like getting to the kingdom of heaven or suffering less, you need to do some self-improvement to do that. We're all on the same page. Confucianism, there's this focus in terms of it being self-correction through modesty and deference. So a lot of this comes back to the social hierarchy and in playing your role and not overstepping your bounds within that hierarchy. So if we think again about this concept of self we've been talking about with the other ones, Confucianism, the self is real, but it's defined by those social relationships and roles. So again, it's looking at the larger picture. And I think in some ways you think about again, both Christianity and Buddhism, a lot of it has to do with understanding interbeing in Buddhism or Christianity. You think about God. God is much bigger than you. We could go off for a half hour on what do you mean when you say God, but it is the larger, like everything, the sum total of everything. It's bigger than we can even imagine or talk about. So it's not too far off. Psychology favors humility because it is highly beneficial for individuals and their relationships. In psychological terms, humility is an accurate self-awareness and low self-preoccupation. So I think if you look again at these other practices, both those elements are there. It's who are you really, if there is a you, and low self-preoccupation naturally comes from understanding the bigger picture and your role within it. And obviously, yes, psychology says the self is real, and I tend to agree, but often distorted, and I tend to agree. So, okay, now we got a better idea of what it is, but what are the real benefits from a psychological perspective? Obviously, Confucianism talks about benefiting society. Buddhism talks about lessering suffering, but let's get more specific about that. Or what do you mean inherit the kingdom of God? Well, first up, having humility improves your relationships. Our most cherished relationships are with people who recognize our dignity as human beings. You want a definition of the word dignity here? It is the state or quality of being worthy of honor and respect. We all are worthy of honor and respect. And when people don't recognize that, either they look down on us or they look right through us like we're not there because they're so wrapped up in themselves, they need a little bit more humility. Relationships with people who don't have any humility are they're transactional. These people are self-centered. Everything they do, every situation they're in is always about themselves and what they can get from others. Personal growth is enabled by humility, like we discussed earlier, right? If you can't acknowledge your shortcomings, how are you going to focus on them and fix them? Problems don't just solve themselves. You need to have the humility to be able to see what's going on, and the self-awareness, the accurate self-awareness that you are flawed, you are imperfect, and you can improve, and then to see where you can improve. And this is where these healthy relationships also circle back and help us in terms of personal growth, because those relationships that humility has fostered give us enhanced self-awareness through feedback. If we display humility, people are more likely to give us the feedback we need to improve our self-awareness. Humility enables a better life by cutting stress. And this kind of ties back into the Buddhist concept of lowering suffering. Think for a second, the last time you felt entitled to have something you didn't get, whether you did deserve it, quote unquote, deserve it or not. Remember the last time you felt offended? Maybe somebody, it wasn't dangerous, but they cut you off in traffic, or somebody said something that really just pissed you off. If we have the humility to understand that these things are going to happen, and in the grand scheme of things, we're not as important as we believe we are sometimes, and whatever it is we're missing that we want, that we're not getting, isn't that important. All of that stress can be lessened by having a healthy sense of humility. As Mahatma Gandhi said, humility is the great friend of progress. Humility is also a ward against shame. And I don't know about you, but I do not like feeling shame. And how humility helps is it prevents narcissism. And some of this also ties very closely into this concept of feeling entitled and offended. You are operating from a sense of self and importance of self, and you act out of line, and we all do it from time to time. And when you think about it later, or somebody tells you, hey, you're acting kind of selfish and entitled there, and you feel this shame. And if you've got a proper sense of humility that's well exercised, you can prevent some of that shame. And despite what some people may think, leaders and their followers also feel the benefit of humility when their leaders practice it. So just like as an individual, if you've got humility, you can see things from other perspectives. You can get feedback. As a leader, humility allows you to see things from everyone's perspective and not be stuck on, I'm the leader, I have to have all the good ideas, I'm the only one that knows what's going on. So as a leader with this type of humility, you are much more likely to take advice from other people. And if you are humble, you are open to using that advice from other people and potentially making decisions. And as a leader, beyond having the accurate awareness of a situation, from viewing things from other people's perspectives, you consider the ramifications of your actions from other people's perspectives, and you are much more likely to make decisions that benefit everyone, not just yourself. Donald Trump is a great example here. This man has absolutely zero humility, and he walks around thinking he knows everything, and the only way to get something out of him is to flatter him and fool him, despite all of these benefits and everyone agreeing that humility is good. There's a lot of people that don't really believe it. They've seen it not work out. They've seen what they believe is humility that really isn't proper humility. So we got to be aware of adopting what I call the distortions of humility, right? Things arise from misunderstanding what humility really is, other personal issues that prevent you from practicing it, or you're covering or protecting yourself for some reason. It can also come from expectations we accept from others on what humility is or isn't. So humility is not weakness. Humility is not indecisiveness. It is not failing to assert oneself. These things are meekness. And as I'm going through this series, I like to have some examples of real life characters, but when we talk about humility gone bad, this one is kind of hard. Some of these are kind of hard because you just don't hear about the meek people, the people with low self-esteem issues as much. They don't rise up and become popular, so their stories aren't as widely known. But meekness is fear or the failure to recognize the value of your contributions, or frankly, it could be both. And if we look at a character, I would point to Neville Longbottom from the Harry Potter series. He's a great example of meekness. He started out really unsure of himself, really didn't claim his power, but by the end of the series, he was all about it. He stood up and he was a strong man, and that was an example of someone who started out meek and grew out of it. Osho says, nobody is superior, nobody is inferior, but nobody is equal either. People are simply unique and incomparable. You are you, and I am I. And at the same time, humility is not low self-esteem. Again, Michael Scott from The Office is a great example of a character with low self-esteem. Michael was always looking out for external validation. He thought he was the man, but he wasn't quite sure, so he needed people to tell him he was. And he was always doing ridiculous things to compensate for his low self-esteem and get attention and get his idea across. We're all born with worth. This comes back to this concept of dignity and respect and worth. We're all born with worth. We're all born worthy of respect. We all fall short of perfection, but that doesn't forfeit our worth or right to be respected. Modesty is another term that sometimes get conflated with humility. People get confused. What is modest? What is not modest? What is humble? Modesty is really the outward behavior. Humility is the internal attitude. So when you see someone that's being humble, when you see someone with a strong sense of humility, they will appear modest. Maybe they're Nelson Mandela and he's talking to the gardeners when he shouldn't be and introducing them to world figures like, hey, okay, so it's good. We've got a bunch of definitions for it. We know what it is not. So how do we cultivate humility? Humility is something, again, I mentioned this at the top, you have to actively develop and maintain it. It doesn't fit with our wiring that was built for ego yet. Maybe someday we'll get there. Give us another million years. Thankfully, there are many ways to exercise it. Some we can do by ourselves, some require others, but as you start to practice it and develop those relationships, you should have chances for both. The first thing that is recommended for cultivating humility is mindfulness. Mindfulness fuels the self-awareness required for humility. I'm going to do a separate explainer on mindfulness at some point in time. For the sake of today, let's just say mindfulness it's not meditation as you normally think of it, just sitting there and chanting or sitting there and listening to a guided meditation. Mindfulness is checking in with our thoughts and our emotions to see what's going on beneath the surface. It's something you can practice just sitting there and just being aware of the thoughts in your brain. It is something that you can do in moments of time. You can do all by yourself while you're doing something else. If you're doing like washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, things that don't require a lot of thought. They're kind of on autopilot. What you really do is you focus very keenly on the physical sensations and the room that you're in, all of the sounds you can hear, everything you can see, and the thoughts that are flashing across your mind along the way. These kinds of thoughts that we typically, they drive our behavior. So maybe it's our subconscious, and it's coming up with ideas and it's bouncing them around in our head. Often we just get stuck to certain thoughts and we believe, hey, I need to think this through and I need to work on this for a while. But mindfulness is more about recognizing them and letting them go and getting some space from them. So in terms of humility, mindfulness for me, the best trigger that I always use when I'm trying to apply mindfulness is whenever I have a negative emotion. When I notice myself having a negative emotion, you start with a little bit of self-compassion, like, hey, this happens, right? People get mad, people get frustrated, people get sad. This isn't going to last forever, but why? What was my brain just doing that brought forth this emotion in me? So I can maybe recognize what's going on and become more self-aware about the entitlement I feel or the illusion of self that I am propping up and telling stories around how something is going to happen 2 weeks from now and I'm going to be so embarrassed because X, Y, and Z. So mindfulness is really, this is a way to do self-awareness. It is the best way for self-awareness, is to become aware of your thoughts and kind of trying to, in beliefs and emotions, and trace them back to their origin and then say, oh, that's right. This is why I feel this way about it. Well, what beliefs are behind this thought? What beliefs are behind this belief? And then tracing that train of thought back to some source where maybe you can decide this was a bad assumption. I can change this, or I don't need to think this way. So mindfulness is, again, it's very important in terms of developing humility because it gives you the self-awareness. It gives you the ability to assess yourself much more accurately. Journaling, some people do gratitude journaling to help their humility. Write about things gifted to you through grace. There are things that we are given by this world. There are things that we earn through hard work and luck, but even those things we earn through hard work and luck, there is also a lot of grace and a lot of factors the universe lined up to give us those things. And when we focus on those with gratitude, it centers our self-esteem on what we control, which is our effort. It helps us feel less entitled. If we're grateful, then as C.S. Lewis said, true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. So the next thing we can do is to put more focus on others. We're always thinking about ourselves and our situation. When we think too much about ourselves, we tend to get lost in our stories. This is where we're playing with this self and making it up to be more than it has to be. And we're building expectations that lead to entitlement. And we're just thinking about our needs and our perspective on the world. And we're losing some self-awareness because we don't understand what's going on around us. Our self, or whatever it is embedded in a situation. And if we focus more externally, we see that better. And that allows us to see ourselves better. When we think too much about ourselves, we miss opportunities to connect with other people. And those relationships, like we mentioned before, those relationships we build through that outward focus provide growth opportunities for us in terms of giving us feedback. So when we invite and accept feedback, which takes humility, to ask people to give us feedback, potentially criticize what we're doing, we're growing our self-awareness. And as we're involved in these things, we are anchoring ourselves in the reality. And when we combine this with that concept of gratitude journaling, we realize that we need to share credit for our successes with other people. Every one of our successes, there's a component of somebody else's work that enabled that to happen. And at the same time, admitting fault for our failures. You could talk about other people, this, that, or the other thing. You have fault in your failures or things you could have done better. And it's not a big deal. You don't have to lose self-respect for it. You don't lose dignity in an honest person's eyes for it. And finally, when we are doing this, we also need to assume the best intentions of others, which really is part of recognizing the limits of our understanding, which prevents us from being entitled and blinded. It allows us to be able to share that credit with others, to be able to admit the fault for our failures. If we start off by just assuming the best intent of others, it lowers our stress. There's also a variant called intellectual humility, which is really specifically about the things you know. It is about recognizing that our knowledge has limits. All of human knowledge combined has limits. Our subset of human knowledge definitely has limits. To practice this or to cultivate this, the first thing you need to do is view your knowledge. It's not a part of you. You don't have to go so far as like Buddhism and say there is no self, there is no you, but to have intellectual humility and to be able to practice it, you can separate the collection of knowledge you have is not part of your identity. It is not who you are. It is something you have as an asset, but having this separation of our knowledge and our identity helps us to change our minds. When we're wrong about something, if we're confronted by feedback from someone else, if we learn something new and we realize we were wrong, this allows us to change our minds without having to navigate changing who we are. It's very easy to change your mind about a nugget of knowledge, how many points the Packers scored in the last game. If that is a part of who you are, that you know everything about the Packers and you're never wrong, to navigate changing who you are. And obviously, you can exercise intellectual humility by engaging with opposing viewpoints. If you are never challenged, you will never find out where you are wrong. You will never grow your body of knowledge. So in the process of researching this, I grew a little bit myself. And I'm big on self-improvement. I've studied a lot of these concepts before. But again, it came back to noticing that mindfulness, noticing moments of entitlement and the stress that came with them. It's actually the stress that I noticed first. I'm like, oh, I'm stressed. Why am I stressed? Why am I upset? Well, I didn't get X, and really I deserved X. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you deserved it or not necessarily. That's maybe something you need to address, but that feeling of entitlement, like you should have had it already, and being stressed about it, and believing that you are the center of the universe, it was causing me stress. So again, use your emotions as your cue to be mindful and to just stop and have a bit of compassion for the emotion, and then ask it where it came from and chase that down to the core belief that you can work with from there. I also noticed moments of meekness in myself and others, times where I don't want to inconvenience this person. And it was a friend of mine, and the person that they didn't want to inconvenience was a person that would have been doing their job, and their job was customer service. And that's what they're supposed to do. It's not a matter of inconveniencing them. That's their job. Ask them a question. You don't have to know everything. They'd probably love to lend a hand. They don't want to sit there being bored. So I also noticed moments of meekness. We need humility. It feeds the self-awareness required for satisfaction and success. We are not playing the game of life alone. The cooperation that humility enables is a winning move. It can't lead to low self-esteem. If you don't recognize your worth, others won't. It can't be an excuse to not exercise your agency. You can't let fear guide your life. You can't sit on the sidelines. We all have worth. It's our job to share that with the world. A well-tuned sense of humility helps us to do that. That's all for today's show. Thank you for listening. The part I enjoy most about this show is knowing that people get something out of it, so please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also head over to the About page on my site, adulting.media, to find out more. Once again, thanks for listening, and all the best.